All right, so today I want to talk about the thing that we all try to avoid, that we really don't want to have to deal with as freight brokers and truck drivers, and that's damaged freight. Because we know with damaged freight, sometimes we have claims, right? But what you're going to realize is that even when you hire good drivers that are on top of things, that are making sure they report things as they happen, you can still have damages. And sometimes it's not your fault, not the driver's fault, but we still have to deal with damaged freight from time to time because that's just part of the business. When you're moving freight up and down the highway, when it's getting loaded and unloaded, sometimes damages occur. So today we're going to talk about damaged freight and what you should do when damaged freight happens. So come on inside, sit back, relax, and let's get down into the business. All right, so before we go any further, let's cover the Carmack Amendment, because of course we have to have rules, guidelines, and amendment to cover the relationship between the shipper and the carrier. It gives the shipper the right to recover damages from the carrier in the event that property damages take place as a load moves from point A to point B in interstate commerce. Now, if you were listening carefully, you probably noticed that I didn't say anything about the freight broker having liability under the Carmack Amendment. And that's because freight brokers don't have any liability as the Carmack Amendment is concerned. But you have to remember, freight brokers hire carriers. And if you do what we call negligent hiring, there is case study to prove that freight brokers could be held liable. So as long as your hiring practices are above board, you should be just fine. So make sure that you're hiring qualified carriers at all times. Now, although freight brokers may not have liability as far as damages are concerned to freight, we also have to understand that the carrier is a part of your team. He's a part of your network. So we don't want to just assign liability or side with the shipper when they assign liability to the carrier. You want to do research into what happened so you can find out who exactly should be assigned the liability for those freight damages. Because what happens a lot of times, at least with the type of freight that we move, carriers are not able to see freight being loaded on trucks. And if they can't see it, what could easily happen is the person that's loading the truck could hit that freight, hit those boxes with the forklift and damage that freight on their own, and they just go ahead and load it up, and then the carrier is not aware of that until he gets to the consignee, and the consignee says, oh, okay, we have 10 boxes that have been damaged. Now, he has no idea that has happened, that forklift may have hit that box, and now they're trying to put the damages on the carrier. We want to make sure that we look into that, and you can easily see sometimes that a forklift may have hit that box, and that has nothing to do with the carrier. So we shouldn't be just automatically assigning responsibility or agreeing with the shipper that the responsibility should be on the carrier. I cannot tell you the number of times that damages have occurred on the upload. Didn't have anything to do with the carrier. So when that happens, what we do, when the carrier gets to the consignee and they say, hey, we're not going to be able to accept 10 boxes or 5 boxes, whatever the number may be, the first thing that we have the carrier do is to take a picture of those boxes, take a picture of the lot number, where those boxes may have been hit, and we send those pictures to the shipper, and the shipper says, hey, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. Have the carrier take those boxes and discard them away from the facility, or he can keep those boxes, but we don't have to worry about the carrier being charged or a claim being filed on those boxes because it didn't have anything to do with the carrier. Always make sure you're looking into things and doing your due diligence. Don't just allow for your carrier to be charged for something, because a lot of times he's had nothing to do with that. Now, if something happens in transit, then of course you have to look further into it. If something happens in transit and the carrier is responsible, then we have to give the responsibility to the carrier. And we've even had situations where at first glance it seems as if the carrier is responsible because this happened in transit. We've had loads that flipped, several pallets that flipped over. And when these pallets flip over, you have to go in and now you have to get the consignee to restack those pallets. And consignees charge a lot of money sometimes, $800, $1,200 to do restack fees. And when it first started happening, the shipper was just taking that and saying, okay, we'll go ahead and pay it. But as it continued to happen, the shipper said, hey, this is on the carrier and we're going to make the carrier pay for these restacks. And what we started to do was look into it and find out, hey, what's really going on here? Because even when the carrier put load locks throughout the entire load, those loads were still flipping. And what had happened when we started to really look at it and find out was they started to use smaller boxes, and these smaller boxes were sliding and they were flipping. That had nothing to do with the carrier. So because it didn't have anything to do with the carrier, the shipper said, you know what? We understand what's happening now. It's because of the boxes that are being used, and we're not going to charge the carrier. But had we just said, okay, we'll go ahead and let the carrier know that we're going to have to take that out of his pay, or the carrier is going to have to pay for that load to be restacked, then we would just be charging the carrier for nothing. So always look into things and make sure you're doing your due diligence so that your carrier is not responsible for things that he's not responsible for. So now I don't want to make it seem like the freight broker is the ultimate decision maker and we are the authority and we can stop shippers from filing claims, because that's just not the case. But we can speak up for our carriers. You're going to talk to your carrier. He's going to tell you his side of the story, what happened. All I'm saying is relay that information to your shippers. Some shippers are very reasonable and they understand sometimes that they may not be seeing it for how it really is, and they'll look into it a little further, and maybe your carrier wouldn't be charged. So just do your due diligence, do what you're supposed to do, and I think a part of that is taking care of the carrier. The carrier is working with you, getting those loads moved, so the proper thing to do is at least tell his side of the story. But we also have to understand as freight brokers that sometimes carriers are negligent. Sometimes carriers are driving recklessly, and drivers sometimes cause damage to freight. And when that happens and shippers file claims, that's just a part of it. That's how it works. That's what I wanted to share with you today. I certainly hope this information has been helpful. If you're interested in learning more about the freight broker business, I'll leave a free link in the description. It's my 5-video series, and it's titled How the Load Movement Process Works. It'll give you a chance to come into the office with me, and you can watch over my shoulder as I move loads, talk to shippers and carriers to give you a better understanding of how this business works before you come into it. And then if you're interested in learning more about how we go out and find those customers, find those valuable shippers that we work with, I'll leave you a free video right here to show you exactly how that's done. So until the next time, I wish you the very best in this life, in your business. See you at the top, because the bottom is much too crowded.